This is one of the most important sessions on the Hispanic Leadership Summit. You have been all exposed to what is the global plan, what are the Sustainable Development Goals. This session will actually talk about the why. Why does it matter? And why does it matter for us, the Hispanic community, to get into the Sustainable Development Goals as a way to actually advance our agenda? But also, why is it important for the Sustainable Development Goals to tap and to get communities like ours to push so that we can deliver on the plan that we have? So, if you don't mind, I would like to ask these three experts here about your opinion about why this is relevant. I would like to start with Ambassador Juan José Gómez Camacho. You were instrumental in helping Mexico as a country not only negotiate the Sustainable Development Goals, but also implement them and adapt them at the country level. And that was a hard exercise because you had to adjust national priorities and then put them with global. But at the end of the day, what can we learn as a Hispanic community about that? And why do you think what we're trying to do relevant for the Hispanic community?
Gracias, Claudia. Let me approach it in two ways, especially as you ask for the Hispanic community in the US more than the experience in Mexico, but using that experience. I think first what it needs to be understood is that traditionally the notion of development, sustainability, prosperity, etc., it was perceived only as a poor country challenge, not a wealthier, richer country as a US problem. If any, the whole thing was, let's help the poor. That was the logic in the past. And what the Sustainable Development Goals do is to make us all understand that we all human beings are on the same boat, that inequality is not a problem only for the poor countries, but also for the rich. That challenges of labor, quality of labor, is not only a problem of the poor, but also of the wealthier countries. That climate change and environmental challenges are not only, again, challenges of poorer countries, but also the wealthier countries. This is to say, first, that the SDGs, the 17 goals, are as applicable to the US as they are to Mexico or any other country in the planet. If a country, if a society want to build prosperity, they need to work on the SDGs, because the SDGs is not only a bureaucratic UN-led program of action. It's a deeper understanding of what we need as human beings, as communities, to live or to lead in the future healthier, more robust lives. And the Hispanic community in the US is not an exception. In fact, it is a good example of what the SDGs can do for a community. And I would say here that, as you have said it before, and in our conversations we have talked about, we have a very robust community in the US. The Hispanics in the US are a very robust group of people, diverse, hardworking, but not necessarily well-connected. You still see that some cohesion or coherence around them is missing. And I think the SDGs could do a lot for that. Second, this diverse Hispanic community in the US have or belong or have action throughout the social, let's call it, map of the US. You have hardworking people, unskilled, you have hardworking people, skilled, and you have also in the upper levels, investors, managers, people working in the corporate world. All of them together have to play a role. It's really crucial. Those that employ, for example, Hispanics leading companies, they have to play a role and to understand this, for the simple reason that the SDGs is not only about government doing this or that. It's also about companies doing this or that. It's about companies developing sustainable business models, not as a charity, but transforming their business model from within. And if they are Hispanic, if they have Hispanics leaders, or Hispanic employees, this would be very critical. And third, allow me to say this. The Hispanics following the SDGs not only will contribute to their own communities, wherever they are, wherever they are in the US as Hispanics. Not only will they help to improve their quality of life or their living standards, but also equally important, and is not often or often not said or never said, is how much can they contribute to the US as a country. If the US, as rich and important as it is, wants to continue being what it is, and even better and greater, wealthier, with less inequality, with less social challenges, they will need also the Hispanic community contributing with the SDGs. And this is extremely important. So the Hispanic community can contribute, A, to improve their quality of life themselves as a community, B, can be or become a great contributor to the US as a whole to improve its living standards nationally.
Thank you so much, John. You've seen it all. You're one of the most fervent advocates for the Sustainable Development Goals of sustainability, working for Brookings Institutes and the 20 other hats that you wear. The Hispanic community is massive, as Ambassador Camacho said, but we also face incredible barriers and gaps that are really stopping us from accessing the potential, the power that we have. In your experience, seeing this and seeing it all across the world, and knowing that we as a Hispanic community, we have barriers, we have massive potential, but we don't have a plan. Why do you think this is relevant? Why do you think doing the exercise that we're doing of seeing the SDGs through the Hispanic lens and converting it to the HSDGs matters?
Muchas gracias, Claudia. Thank you so much. I think it's exactly as the ambassador was saying, that there's so many perspectives and so many different walks of life that people bring to these issues. The SDGs or the HSDGs might not be terms that people are used to talking about, but they're issues that people already care about. And when I go around to talking to communities and groups all around the world, I like to ask people at the very beginning, what's the biggest issue that you think is the single biggest thing that your community needs to solve or the world needs to solve? And if you have 20 different people in a room, you'll get pretty much 20 different answers, because everyone sees something as the most important, whether that's tackling hunger or tackling climate change or jobs or gender equality. And the reality is each of them is right. And so what these goals are ultimately is a way to get everyone on the same page, literally and figuratively, about what they're trying to solve, and to remove the sense of competition of, is it gender equality or jobs or climate? That's a silly question. It's all the above. And so we need to have ways for people to connect, because these issues are also interconnected in practice. And if we've seen one thing in the world this year, it's that our issues of environment and health and jobs and inequality and exclusion are deeply interconnected all around the world. So these goals allow us to get specific about that. And if we get everyone on the same page, literally and figuratively, then we can start to look at, like you and your team have done, well, where are we doing better? Where are we doing worse? Where do we really need to double down our efforts? And we can start to be more specific about how all of us need to be solving these problems in parallel and in concert, and have a common scorecard for how we're doing. So ultimately, I think of these sustainable development goals as two things. One is they're often described as what the world or the UN told the world to care about. I actually think it's the opposite. I think it's the issues that the world told the UN not to forget about. And it's the diplomats like the ambassador that pulled it all together onto the same page so we all have the same scorecard. But then the second thing is it allows us to get specific. What do we mean by challenges? What do we mean by the economic, the social, the environmental? And to keep track of that common scorecard so that we can say, we need to do better here. Let's work together to figure that out.
Yeah, and there's also a sense. I think that there's also a sense. If I would ask Hispanic leaders all across, John, I would say that not everybody is as familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, and being an advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals, you want groups like Hispanics that we're so massive in power that we don't really recognize how important we are to global affairs, like a global framework like that, to advance it. So I think it is a point that I would like to make later. Beth Brady, the chair of our advisory board, the person that keeps us straight and on a strategy. Thank you so much for everything what you do, Beth, for us at the World Human Foundation. I'm here to ask you something else, though. Instead of saying your praises, I'm here to ask you, in your experience in corporate America and running foundations yourself, why is this relevant? And why, like aligning the SDG, like Hispanics aligning with the SDGs, will make it easier to get corporate funding, to measure, like what John said, the scorecard that you've been so advocate saying, like measuring is a mess, and having, like a set of common scorecards, and also, like running a charity. You had a lot of experience of dealing with these issues, and how does that help us?
Yeah, well, thank you, Claudia, and it's a pleasure to be here in such great company, talking about something that I'm really passionate about, as you know, which is the Sustainable Development Goals and how they can help the world focus on those things that are most important to having a healthy globe. So, coming from the perspective of corporate America, and for all of you out there, I've been in corporate America 25 plus years and running businesses and such. I've also worn the hat, as Claudia mentioned, of actually running a foundation, being on boards of nonprofit organizations, and of course, working closely with Claudia and the We Are Human Foundation. And the one thing that I can tell you is that the true practical answer is corporate America has to care about this, because their very livelihood is connected to the health of our country. And the health of our country is connected to the people in the country. So the Hispanics are a huge customer of companies. They're a huge employee base of companies. They are a part of our fabric, and we will, as a country, will not survive unless we have all of our people healthy and all of our people with equal opportunity. So corporate America needs to care about this, because the bottom line is the bottom line. They aren't going to be able to survive and be profitable and be successful if they aren't embracing all of the people in this country. The problem has been, and why I'm such a fan of the Sustainable Development Goals, is because corporate America looks out like everyone else and says, wow, where do we start? And so the SDGs do a wonderful job of laying out the framework of where the problem is, so that corporate America can say, hey, if I'm, a company, I work for General Mills, we really understand food, and we understand food systems, and we understand the issue of hunger. This is a place we can help. And corporate America is increasingly recognizing that it's not just about giving money out, which, by the way, is incredibly important, but it's also about becoming part of the problem-solving network. So it's not just about giving money to organizations to say, you go solve this problem, but corporate America needs to, and increasingly is, collaborating with nonprofits and foundations and government entities to be able to help solve the problems. And one of the things I always said when I was working at Principal and the foundation reported into me is, we really want to find those things that are not just a handout, but a hand up. We want to help people get to a place where they can then help themselves and help others around them. So, corporate America increasingly is, but still isn't doing enough to be able to collaborate to solve these problems. And it really does start with, who are the people in our country that need the help the most? And Claudia, the facts are there. I mean, the disproportionate effect of COVID on minorities, particularly Hispanics, and the disproportionate effect of just the social injustice that's going on is also with minorities and Hispanics. So that's a place to start.
And so you think, Beth, that by us having a version of the SDGs seen through the lenses of Hispanics is going to help us to connect better with corporate America and with the efforts to achieve the SDGs. Is that right?
Absolutely, because corporate America is looking for, helping them identify what the problem is, right? You can't solve a problem until you're clear on what the problem is. So what you're doing with this connecting the Hispanic agenda with the SDGs is you're saying through the SDG lens, let's look at where we have some real opportunities to make a difference. And corporate America is all about, helping them figure out where to focus. And then the other thing is that there's measurable impact that can be made. And corporate America is about, okay, I want to help support this, but I also want to know that I'm making an impact and that we're somehow measuring the results of what we're trying to do. So absolutely, I think it's a really great way to communicate with corporate America about how they can make a difference.
So you all said this is a great way to get specific, to have a common scorecard, to unify, to identify the problems, to align, to make it easier, and have it as a framework. We are embarking in understanding where do we stand as a community within the SDGs. We are seeing the heat map. We know where we're going to be presenting now. What are the red zones? What are the red flags? What are the orange? Where are we green? And where do we actually connect that? You are all experts on this. What are your advice? What else? What is your advice for us as a community? The leaders of the Hispanic community are listening to you now. What is your advice? What can you tell? What are the do's and don'ts? What are the best practices? What's next? How can we take it forward and really make it meaningful for us to advance our community using a framework and measuring mechanism as well? But also, how do we actually help the SDGs get advanced by being an open minority that is taking this forward? John.
What a great question. I think there are probably a few things that I'd suggest, but curious what others' views are. I think, at the first point, getting people's voice together, as you say, matters hugely. So just like we're seeing so many business leaders across the country and around the world start to speak up on, stakeholder capitalism, the need for broader understanding of the responsibilities of companies, not just in the important work of philanthropy, but also in their core business practices. What are the problems our products and services are solving? This is huge. And when business leaders speak up, for example, to say this matters, a lot of policymakers and politicians tend to listen too. So it's not just about what gets said, but it's also about what gets heard and sending the signals that this is important and these are problems that need to get solved. A second thing I'd say, though, is really this focus on getting specific. If there's a through line that the diplomats really said over and over again in firming up this agenda, it's leave no one behind. And I think that's a central aspect of our political conversation right now, but it has to get specific about specific people getting left behind with specific problems in specific places. And so when we look at a very diverse community, like the Hispanic community across the country, we need to be understanding what are the specific challenges in each community that even individual households are facing. And in a data-rich world, we can get pretty practical about that too. So we don't have to do all big hand-waving about great issues and great megatrends. We can get very specific about the places and people where they live and what they're confronting and what kind of support they might need. But then the third thing I would say is we can introduce a bit of healthy competition around unsolved problems. So there are some of these things that are probably a little more off the shelf that we could be tackling, things like social protection, unemployment insurance, things that we know how to do and we're seeing very quickly being rolled out amid the crisis right now. There are a bunch of things that are harder to solve. How do we transition to a zero carbon emissions economy? How do we really tackle the healthy diets question and the child obesity challenge around the world? These are unsolved problems where, in my view, one of the things we can do, and in my home country of Canada, I've really advocated this, is we could have each community experimenting with its own approaches and say, look, we've got a breakthrough here. And if everyone's tracking these same indicators on these unsolved problems, we can learn from each other to see, look at what they tried there and look at what they tried here. And if we put those two things together, that's where the magic happens. So I think we can start to really make this a community-based approach. We can use words and language that fit and are relevant to each community to bring these issues to life. But we can do it in a way that's kind of generating new approaches rather than expecting it to all be just, someone else's business or, press a lever and it'll happen. It's often going to be quite the opposite.
Thank you. Yes, I Beth, please, but okay. Let me just say, because it's like burning, and otherwise I'm not gonna be able to sleep tonight because I didn't say. It is critical to understand that all the issues are interconnected, but at the same time, understanding what are the interventions that you have to apply first, depending on how transformational they can be. That's how the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria came up, saying those are the three things that really are interventions that can be transformational for health altogether, because you can isolate them and achieve them faster. It doesn't mean that you're not going to do the rest, but you're going to do that first. Beth.
Yeah. First of all, I think everything you said, John, is dead on. One thing that I think that, and I'll put on my, having sat on the side of being a funder, giving funds out as a foundation, one of the things that I think that was showing to be very effective was kind of what you were saying, which is that you need to get communities involved. This cannot be about, some large organization, whether it be a government organization or even a nonprofit or a corporation coming in and sort of, doing a wide swath of here's some money, go do something. You got to get communities involved. And one of an organization that I'm currently involved in is really about solving problems at the grassroots level, which says, if it's education, you've got to get the schools, the teachers, the parents, the community all working hard. And education is an important one. And in this particular foundation called Action for Healthy Kids, the reality is that the most in need are your minority populations, and Hispanics are at the top of that list. And so solving these problems is about having the conversation. So the work that you do, Claudia, is incredibly important. There's programming out there that is about, helping to connect people to food if they have a hunger issue, or connecting them to, financial experts that can help them with their financial life. But there's another huge need, which is oftentimes not recognized enough, which is this advocacy of bringing the issue alive and making sure that people are aware of it. So, I would say continue down that path, because I've been on this journey with you now for 2 years, and the difference between 2 years ago and now for just having the conversations has been huge. All of a sudden, it's become much more on people's radar, and that's because of the advocacy side of things. So there's the programming side, there's the everybody involved side, and then there's the continued conversations around advocating for finding solutions.
Ambassador, your advice.
I of course agree with everything that has been said, and let me start from something John mentioned, which I agree, and you too. To give you my observation on this. It is true that the SDGs make no sense on their own. None of the 17 makes sense alone. The whole concept and construction of SDGs as a way to ensure longer-term prosperity for all is precisely to keep them connected, because they interact with each other. They reinforce each other, and they allow others to be materialized or to be realized. Now, what you said is critical. That doesn't mean that we all have the same challenges as a country and as a community. So first point here is that the work you are doing in mapping, in having a sort of radiography of what are the specific challenges of this super diverse large community in the US, which are Hispanics, within the framework of SDGs is critical. So yes, they all are together. We need them all, but what are the challenges for Hispanics? Labor, inequality, gender, health, immigration. Let's see, and you will find out. This is critical. Second, the SDGs implementation or materialization in the future is a combination, is very structural. The change is structural. So it's a combination of many actors. One has to do, of course, with the society itself, and I will explain on the Hispanics. But it's very much about governments and public policy, changing or developing public policy that tries to precisely materialize or to implement the SDGs. And it's, of course, about larger institutions and private sector, as Beth explained. Something we realized both in Mexico and globally when doing this is that at the end of the day, the sole guarantor that all this will happen, meaning companies will change and develop sustainable business models, and governments will develop and deploy the right public policy towards implementing the SDGs, is when the society is aligned behind them. This is what is very critical. And let's come back to the Hispanics. That's exactly what the Hispanics can do, to align themselves, what are their challenges around the SDGs, and make sure that not only themselves, but the other great and even more important actors or players on this, meaning the private sector, and very much so the political level, governments, federal governments, state governments, municipal governments, etc., are also pursuing these new policies. And on this, let me give you a couple of ideas that I think, or suggestions that I think would be critical. We also realized, and this I believe it, the SDGs is not only about all what I have said, policies, changing of this or changing of that, but most importantly is a way of think. It's a change of mindset. And this new mindset has to happen in the people. We focused, we try to do it in Mexico and many other countries the same because of this realization to work with the youth. Prepare the youth, teach the youth, teach young Hispanics in primary school, in high school, secondary, wherever they are, this new way of thinking. These notions of sustainability have to be in their DNA, because this is what is going to make sure or to ensure something critical here, which is change of behavior. This is what the SDGs are. A change of behavior, a change of attitude, a change of mindset. From this change of mindset, change of policy comes. Change of business models also happens. This is critical, so the youth, education, make sure that the next generations will be these guarantors of this change. And on the same lines, women, Claudia. Women are massive agents of transformation. And I think in this mapping that you are doing, in this work you are doing with the Hispanic community in the US, which is large, which is amorphous, but is very robust, women have to play an incredible role. First, creating equality, reducing the inequality, gender inequality, which is dramatic everywhere in the world. The Hispanic community, not only we do right in trying to reduce that, which is a central point of the SDGs, but the community as such doing this will empower itself as well. And I conclude with what I said before. The Hispanic community is not only a force to change itself, it's a force to keep changing for good the US as a whole. And this is something that in the US has to be seen, has to be recognized, and has to be garnered, because I think the power there is enormous.
Thank you so much. We have a lot of young people. As a fact, we're the largest youth group in America, and Latinas are actually surpassing Latinos. So we have a lot of that and a lot of issues to solve, but a lot of, we're at time. I want to thank you so very much for helping frame this conversation. I just want to finish with literally a 3-word final word of encouragement for all of us, for many of the Latino community. This is brand new. And for many people, this is scary and maybe feels futile. So if you don't mind, just like give it a 3-word encouragement, ending with, yes, can we count on you moving forward in this journey that we're going to take? I'm going to start with Beth Brady, please.
Well, I think 3 words, huh? Learn and get involved.
Ambassador.
Learn and get involved.
Your mindset.
John.
Dedication drives breakthroughs.
Right. And I think that I'm going to take it that yes, we can count on you in the journey that we have. Yes, you think this is a good idea, so let's get going. I cannot be more grateful, Beth, John, and Ambassador Camacho. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you.